Welcome, Chris, Lauren, and Alex. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey.
It's so lovely to be here with you guys for this Snowpoet hang. Thanks for having me be with you across these beautiful albums. And we're in this lovely studio in Hackney. Alex Killpartrick is with us today. Alex, this is your spot. Thanks for hosting us.
Well, it's nice to have you.
It's great to be here. So today we'll be chatting about your beautiful self-titled debut album from 2016, and great to have Alex with us, who's worked on all the records. So thanks, Alex, for joining us. It'll be great to hear from you about your amazing work on the albums. So I think we all felt that this first episode was a really lovely way to kind of set up some foundational things that fans, listeners wouldn't know, about like how you guys first started working together, how you arrived at the blend of things elements that became the Snowpoet sound, how you came up with the name and all of that sort of thing. But I think, the heart of all of these albums is really the collaboration between you guys, Chris and Lauren. So maybe we start with how you guys first met, and then we'll bring in Mr. Killpartrick as things start cooking. So how did you guys first meet?
Well, we met in the merry year of 2012.
Yeah.
I was doing a master's at the Royal Academy of Music, and Lauren came in my second year of my postgraduate. So
Yeah, so you were doing a 2-year and I was doing a 1 year.
yeah, and we're kind of probably about halfway in to the second year
Yeah.
till we properly sort of started getting to know each other. And
Yeah, we'd been in class for a while together,
yeah,
but we were just kind of moving through the motions of 1, 2.
I'm on playing a blues.
What class was it? Do you remember? It was on ensemble.
Repertoire
class.
at 9 a.m.
Oh,
And
brutal.
I had a double rep because I was doing it in 1 year. So you guys had 2 hours and I had 4 hours.
Right.
Oh my
So
God.
I had all the classes, but just in double the length. And I actually don't know how I did it when I
No.
look back in it.
No.
'Cause
2 hours is-
there's no window in that room.
No, yeah. 9 a.m. on a Monday
Brutal.
with no natural light. It was pretty grim.
There's something about music in rooms with no windows, isn't there? It seems to be a thing.
And I had personally been drifting less into the sort of, I loved jazz, and I'd spent a lot of time getting really deep in jazz, listening to, jazz from, across, the span of the whole history of jazz. But at that point I was starting to listen to more vocal music, more folk music, more electronic music,
Yeah.
more non-jazz music, and really felt that I wanted to collaborate with a vocalist and start writing songs and exploring that side of things as opposed to instrumental music and jazz, as a sort of contemporary jazz, like a lot of people were at college at the time. And I always remember this one class where we were in a rep class and you sung a song, I think it was Prelude to a Kiss, and just being in that sort of Monday morning 9:30 a.m.
Fog.
And then sort of Lauren's voice just seeping into my ear like nectar, and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. Wow.
And I remember at that point thinking, oh, maybe I'll pluck up the courage to ask Lauren if she would like to write some tunes. And I'd kind of previously written some instrumental music, which was quite simple melodically, and kind of felt like it wasn't super complex, where it was going to be difficult to sort of shoehorn a vocalist into, and it was a bit more simple like that. So yeah, I remember approaching you.
At this point, you hadn't ever spoken even before this?
Not
or
really,
you-
because we just kind of, could you play a B flat on that second bar kind of thing. As in, it was just more like we hadn't really spent any time together in a room by ourselves.
No.
So that was when you said, hey, do you want to play some music together? And yeah, I was like, yeah, it just felt like I don't know, I can't even remember being from going into the rep class to, I remember very clearly the first time that we got together again in LG60. And
LG60?
It's just a room.
room.
It's just a room in the basement. It's one of the only rooms that all the jazzers can actually use.
Right.
Yeah, Chris had written some music, and this was before we started writing together. And he was just saying, do you want to write some text or melodies? And I was saying, yeah. And then we started, and then we haven't stopped. And it was kind of just an instantaneous.
It was a connection. It was a
connection.
click. Yeah.
Was it quite instant when you first got in the room and
Completely instant.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was never, and this is the thing, there's always been that wasn't the best, let's go again, or maybe let's try something else. There's always been a kind of an ego-less
approach.
Right?
Yeah.
Where we've always been very frank with each other.
Not taking things personally if I come up with something, Lauren's like, nah, and vice versa, or like, nah, this section doesn't work,
Yeah.
We kind of, there was no...
There's no judgment.
Egginess.
No, and I think, and again, this is going like into detail already, and we're going
Let's
to
go
speak
into
for 5
detail.
minutes.
Hey, listen, let's ride it.
No, I think one of Chris's many amazing traits in that kind of space is just his patience.
Yeah.
And I think when you're being, when you're in that space of creating things together, there's a vulnerableness that kind of needs to be around just the openness of making things together.
Yeah.
And it'd be like, let's go again. Yeah, let's just loop this, and we might loop something for 15 minutes, or let's try a different chord there. There's just kind of an openness.
Yeah.
And no areas that we couldn't go to.
Yeah. No shyness. I always think with the writing
Yeah.
process, sometimes if there's a lot of walls and there's a lot of insecurity, like sometimes it's not easy writing music with someone because you're so paranoid you're going to do something stupid, they're going to judge you for it or whatever. And there was just none of that really, was there?
No.
With either of us.
No.
Yeah, and if you guys had to sort of chart the journey of that initial phase of the collaboration, which ends up moving towards forming a band,
Yeah.
Snowpoet, and a record, what was the process from meeting in that classroom and having those initial sessions together to getting to that point where you're sort of in a thing,
Yeah.
and how does that
Well,
work?
it was the final
Final
performance.
recital, yeah.
Your final recital, Chris, or
It
combined?
was my one, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I did it with Blue Eyed Hawk, and you did
Yeah.
it with, we were the Bears at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were called the Bears.
Really? and who is in the Bears? I like this.
Me, Lauren. It was the band basically. Me, Lauren, Josh, Dave Hamblett,
Robbo.
Matt Robinson, and
Was Ruben in it?
Ruben Fowler, who's a trumpet player.
Yeah.
He played in my final recital.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Alex Monk?
Alex Monk did a little bit of it and then stopped. But
Yeah.
Nick Costley-Watt
Yeah.
was our guitarist.
So
But
the
we-
guys that ended up being a Snowpoet were all on the programme with you guys at uni? Or?
They weren't, but you could bring people in to do your
Oh, right, okay.
finals
Well,
from
we'll get
different
into
colleges.
those guys properly, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we did the concert in the 606. And
It was
lovely.
great. It was
good.
lovely.
It didn't really feel, it felt like a gig, which was really nice. I mean, obviously it was your performance, your final performance, but it already felt very solidified in terms of having a kind of a band energy or an ethos or, a kind of framework. It was kind of there, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and in the rehearsal process, I think that's when you started bringing in the kind of spoken passage
Interesting.
thing. And I remember in a rehearsal
Yeah.
getting serious goosebumps.
Yeah.
When Lauren did that for the
Yeah.
first time, I was
Yeah.
like, "What is that
Yeah,
you're
there's
doing?
something
Whatever
cooking
that
here."
is,
Yeah.
that's weird. I love that. That's
Interesting.
amazing."
Lauren, you
Yeah.
mentioned that the ethos had already started to form of this. Could you put into words what that felt like at that time?
I don't know. I think for me that year was, because it was quite an intense return to education and just kind of getting through a year master's program, I was quite like, I had my hat on of, right, I'm just going to get through this. I have this year to, you know, sort all this out. So I was, I was in quite a headspace of let's just get it all done. And then I think when I met you and when we were moving into this other more personal, just about what being in college might have actually meant and the outcome of being in an institution or what that led to. It felt quite significant because at the time I played a performance with Blue Eyed Hawk, which was a band that I was in at the time, with Laura George and Alex Roth and Corey Dick. That was my final performance, and then the final performance of Chris's was The Bears, and it was a nice moment of kind of finishing the masters and then thinking, there's a musical output here and I like the music and it feels significant in terms of...
It can carry on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That there was artistic integrity and there was meaning to the work rather than moving through things that you had to tick off for an exam.
Yes,
it had none of that, you know, even though it was your performance. Yeah. It was a gig.
Yes.
And, it was meaningful.
So there was a feeling that this could extend beyond the walls of uni and there was something here that could be developed now, maybe beyond at that point. Were you already thinking about that? Or?
Definitely. And I think post music college, I think there's that vacuum where you've had that, all that connection, all that, hanging out with musicians, playing all the time to suddenly like... You're out in the wilderness on your own, and it can be a bit of a shell shock. And I remember thinking, oh God, like, what do I want to do? What do I want to be? And and I felt the thing that meant the most to me musically at that time was that group and that music. So that's when I kind of spoke to Lauren and was like, let's try and make an album.
Wow, okay.
Out of this music, let's try and document it because this is I love it and it means a lot and zero pressure and with no sort of
we weren't like the 5-year plan and then the 10-year. There wasn't any of the formality of the thinking that people might feel like they need now or that people as in it was just a very natural. I want to spend time with you making music. Do you want to spend time with me? Great. This is a nice band to do that with.
It's amazing. I want to come back to something around that time, but now, fast forwarding 4 albums later, is it a surprise to you guys that you're 4 albums and an EP deep into this? Could you have predicted it would have... Did you have a feeling that this might be a long-lasting thing, or is it... I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't tend to generally think... I wasn't thinking about that at that moment.
No.
But if I reflect on it now, it makes sense to me,
Yeah.
And just for a minute, thinking about that collection of songs from that recital that then... Could you say something about that music and how was that music the bedrock of then the recording that you ended up doing? What was that music saying and was it kind of close to the Snowpoet, what became the Snowpoet thing?
Mermaid was one of the...
Did we play Mermaid? We played Little Moon Man, didn't we?
Little Moon Man.
Yeah.
If I Miss a Star.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were like the pre-written ones that I instrumentally brought to Lauren early doors, so they were like not written...
50-50.
Well, they were 50-50 because I feel like the lyrics and the words have 50-50.
Sorry, I just mean in terms of the making of the composition of. Yeah.
I can't...
Did we play Mermaid on the gig?
No, I can't remember. But there was a few that made it to the first record, basically.
But the sound was already emerging. The approach was sort of in motion.
Definitely. The placement of the voice or the spaciousness of what we wanted to say and how incorporating... just instrumental sound with vocal sound, and then the importance of the text and the lyricalness in the text that responded to that in the music and the form and the shaping of things. I feel like that that sensibility was there.
And the spoken word element too, and the
Yeah.
integration of those things.
Yeah. And that wasn't intentional.
Really?
No.
It wasn't. I never
It wasn't
said
like
to
we didn't
Chris,
sit down
"I'm
with a pen and paper like,
interested in-"
okay, let's
No.
should we integrate spoken word into this situation?
What
love
are you
it.
laughing about, Alex?
I love it.
I knew that voice was going to come out.
I'm excited.
It's the voice that creeps in whenever we realise, when we're in the studio and someone's doing something, we're like, hang on, this doesn't make any sense. That voice always comes out.
By the way, when I set up the intro to this, I wasn't very clear to explain that Alex Killpartrick has mixed and engineered all 4 albums,
All of
and it's a
them.
big part of the journey. So we're
Well,
going to bring in
I was
Alex.
literally about to say that. I think what we were saying about what came of me and Lauren meeting was the music, the approach, the space, all that stuff. But the production side of things and that side of making a record was definitely not there. I was completely clueless. I'd never ever sat in front of a DAW, as they're called, and worked on music. I'd never really recorded. I'd done some recordings for other people, but they're very much, in a quite a sort of jazz setting where you're just in front of a mic playing with some music in front of you. But Alex I'd met. Well, I knew Alex from college, but we'd never really...
Yeah, how do you guys met up in Cardiff?
We were both at the Royal Welsh College together. I think you were 2 years above me, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I was doing this course in creative music tech, which is very kind of like Stockhausen and, that avant-garde, that whole world. But I was just spending most of my time in the studio kind of engineering things for people. I had like both things going on at the same time, right? It was like engineering, recording, but also experimental music. And I think up until that point, I'd spent most of my time in college just engineering recordings for people, which, obviously you were playing jazz.
Yeah.
And I really got into jazz while I was at the Royal Welsh because of the jazz course there. Most of my friends were on the jazz course as well. And that's kind of, I think the start of us working together was that. It was jazz, wasn't it? Really?
Well, I actually remember it was after I'd left college and I come back to Cardiff to play a jazz gig, and Alex was like, oh, can I record it for you? I'll do it for free. I was like, yeah, whatever, man, go for it.
Dempsey's.
At Dempsey's.
Was that the spot?
Irish pub, yeah.
All the young cats were playing at Dempsey's.
That was the place.
Love
yeah.
it.
Yeah. Amazing jazz venue, which is gone now. But I would just turn up there with a recording rig. In fact, at one point, I virtually lived next door to it. So I remember on a couple of occasions, I was that guy. I went home, made a cup of tea, and came back with it to watch the second half of the gig. But
Sounds lovely.
But I used to borrow microphones, and I had my own recording rig, and I'd go down there and just set up, because to me it was just fun. Like, let's just see if I can record this band and make it sound good. And you came back with, they were called the Bears at the time.
No, it wasn't. It was a jazz thing, I think.
Oh,
with
no,
Josh
that's it.
and,
That's it, yes.
James Bateman.
And Alex Monk was on it as well. Yeah, of course.
And
you're right.
Yeah, you recorded it, and then I remember being back in London, you were like, oh, I've got that recording from that gig.
You played a song called Never Far From Home.
Yeah. And
Lovely title.
I listened back to it, I was like, what the fuck? This is amazing. Like, from a live performance, I couldn't believe it. It was almost like listening to a fully produced live jazz out. It sounded so good.
Yeah.
And at that point, I sort of thought, okay, this guy
This
knows. Is my guy.
This is your dude.
This is my guy. I found
it.
him.
I love it.
So when it came to doing the album with Snowpoet, it was called The Bears at the time, but
it was called The Bears at the time.
Well, we did our first studio trip as The Bears, but we actually found out The Bears is got another, is like a slang terminology for something kind of a little...
That we won't get into in this podcast.
No.
Okay. Can I just...
So we had to change the name, which is for the better, actually, because I think The Bears is a bit basic,
Who knows?
isn't it?
Yeah, Lauren and I...
It just didn't...
You don't know what it means?
I don't, but I don't.
Okay.
You can tell me after.
Alex can tell you.
I can tell you after, yeah.
So, can I quickly, I guess, backtrack a little? So you've done this performance, you've graduated uni.
Yeah.
What's the journey from there, you obviously came back and did this gig with the Bears, with Alex, right? Yeah. What was the journey from this chapter of things to then getting in the studio, deciding to do something, and then also maybe we can get into arriving at Snowpoet as a name?
Oh, yeah.
So what was the journey there?
Name.
To decide to do all this, do a record, and
it was post-college, the vacuum, and like, I need to do something. We need, I need to,
move it forward
because no one else is going to do this for us. You know, it's not like, being in college where, someone tells you to do this and do that. So we found this studio called Giant Wafer, who Alex had met. The guy who built it, he lives in Llandrindod, Wales, which is in mid Wales, and sort of beautiful studio in the middle of nowhere.
An extremely nice man.
Yeah.
In a beautiful spot.
Nice.
And we went and recorded the tunes, but the first round we kind of, I think I was inexperienced. I wasn't a producer at that time either. I was just a band member, just like, how are we going to do this? So
I think we were all inexperienced, actually. I'd mostly just been recording jazz. It'd been very rare for me to record any other kind of music. Or even when you say record, it's like with jazz, you're just recording it, aren't you? Whereas actually, I think the kind of music we're talking about, the realization process of it is much bigger. There's much more involved than just
the inputting,
plugging in the microphones, dialing in your gain or whatever, and hitting record. It's a lot more than that. But I think that first recording, we approached it like that. It was approached like a jazz record, and I definitely remember having a lot of fun in the studio doing it. But then you've got this record that you take away, and hang on a minute, is this sitting where it needs to?
We'd worked on it after we'd recorded it, and kind of.
As in, are we remembering that's when we went up to Alex's place?
No, this was when we did the record properly, but the first round we ended up actually mixing it and everything, and then sacking half of it off because it just didn't sound very good.
We had 11 tracks.
Yeah,
I think we'd recorded 11 whole songs, right? And I think of those, 3 of them made it onto
the EP,
the first EP, and then we recorded a 4th song, and those 3 tunes, one of them, I just remember the song Always. Bearing in mind, neither of us had a clue about how to make something like that sound right, okay? Yeah. And I just remember thinking, this is fun, I've got this project here. I was living with my dad in Bath. I had no outgoings or anything. I just had loads of time to sit in front of my computer and noodle around, which is, very lucky to be in a position like that. And every day I was like opening up the project and slowly trying to sort of wrangle what was cool, it was fun to make, but it just wasn't right. Wrangle it into shape that kind of made sense in terms of mixing, but also additional production and all that sort of stuff. And I think whether I was sending it to you, or whether I eventually sent it to you, and you went, I think you'd basically written it off.
Yeah.
And then what it turned into, and hang on, this can work, let's look at what else we have. And there were 2 other songs from Giant Wafer that we'd done. And then you came down, you were travelling down on the train and staying with me in Bath. And there was a 4th song we recorded, which I think was the one on the Wurlitzer.
Yeah.
And we just went, there's probably almost an EP's worth of stuff here.
Yeah. So we managed to sort of squeeze blood from a stone, as they say.
Yeah.
Out of the
initial 11-song Wafer recordings. And that became the EP, did it?
Yeah. And we self-released that, didn't we? And we sort of... And it was kind of the best thing we could have done, because it kind of gave us the energy to go, okay, cool, this is a thing now. We made our statement. Now we can give it another crack and try and make this album and reproduce these songs with a different approach, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's funny, like, I listen back to that, there's so many things that I do differently now, of course, with hindsight. But I think this thing of like your first release, a lot of people seem to go into music thinking like, my first album's gonna make waves.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make this masterpiece.
No,
well, I have to do that if I'm fresh out of college and everyone's talking about me and I've got that wave to ride. And it's like, actually, I think the better approach is to just kind of explore, which was what was happening back then, really.
Yeah, but it's also just long game mentality, and you can't, like, thinking about the first performance of something or a piece of music or, you know, a group that you're working with, the first performance is just always going to be the first performance. But, you know, after a tour or after 10 gigs or whatever of playing the same music, it's just going to evolve into something much more mature and considered. And it just, that evolution of time and of development and of process, that's what you're interested in live performance as well as recording performance. And that is, you can't rush that. That just basically has to evolve itself, and it evolves in different ways. And that process is why you do it, you know? It's not for, I need to make this statement and then that's it. I mean, obviously some people have, you know.
It's not about the outcome. I mean, the outcome is when you're excited, when you go through this process and you make this thing, and you look at it and you go, oh my God, I'm actually really pleased with that.
Yeah.
Great. That's the thing that you choose to then go, hey, actually, maybe I want to show this to the world and release it, put my name on it and all that stuff. But actually, the real interest here, like I said, when I was playing with Always, it wasn't with the intention of, you know, let's try and make something releasable. This seems ridiculous. I was just having fun with it. And it was really good fun. I remember when it got to the point where it was like, actually, the sound that's coming out the speakers is actually pretty good. And I can put it on. I want to show it to people. It was like, okay, now there's something has grown here that we can actually take forward, and maybe you can start to think about as an EP or whatever, you know.
Yeah. So you've done this initial session, 11 songs, 4 of which then become an EP, right? Then from that point, what was the process to then arrive at what eventually became the first record that we're going to look at? What happened then?
So the first record, as in the Two Rivers,
Snowpoet,
the Snowpoet, the self-entitled,
yeah.
We'd had some help from a new label and a little bit of money put behind us. So we thought, cool, we can pay the guys, we can go to the studio, we can give this another crack, you know, re-recording. We'd written some more bits and bobs material-wise, and I think with the first EP, what I'd figured out is, oh, cool, you don't have to all record everything at the same time. You can... But literally, I had no idea at that point. So I was like, you can go and record the drums, because if you've got a click track on, then you can put a layer on the top of it. So why don't we do that? So then we can actually think about all the individual components. Of the tunes.
Was that the big key realization in terms of the kind of I know what I can do differently to make this record land in a way that the previous iteration didn't?
Definitely.
Was that the thing?
That was the light bulb. Definitely.
That was the light bulb.
Yeah, because before you'd have a drum kit, an electric bass, Fender Rhodes, a vocal and a guitar, and there's only so much you can do in that moment. Whereas if you've got, you know, a Wurlitzer part, you can focus on the Wurlitzer, and then, you know, Alex can choose the microphone for the Wurlitzer, and then we can get 2 parts of the Wurlitzer, and then the drums can play. I don't know, you just got more time and space to think about what each part is doing, as opposed to, am I going to play the right note at the right time in the right moment? Because if I get this wrong, then we'll have to do another take.
Yeah. And I think in general, like from then until now, thinking about how sophisticated the layering of everything has become, that's also the fun part. Yeah. You know, and the kind of freedom that we have and that the band have when we're recording things together, or if it's just me and you, let's put this on, let's try this, let's add this.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're always coming from the point of, look, why don't we just put lots of stuff down and we can think about the editing of all of it afterwards, and let's just try and generate a lot of material and information.
And then take stuff away.
Let's get it all out. And then,
So, I suppose, Chris, in terms of your journey as a producer, between that first iteration and the second, were you at a point, as part of that light bulb moment, were you sort of thinking, actually there can be post-production, there can be layers sonically, you know, combining acoustic instruments with a kind of otherworldly, ethereal, like that combination that became Snowpoet? Was that part of the light bulb thing for you in terms of the different layers and stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, like synths and stuff at that point. I think I'd bought an OP1, which was like my first synth, which is a little
teenage engineering.
Engineering.
They were new at the time. It was quite a revolutionary synth in that, you know, a lot of, and I'm just looking around the room now, I've got a bunch of synths in here, and they all have all the same kind of terminology on them, you know, filter frequency, sawtooth, square wave, you know, standard terminology that's been around in synth world for years. And the OP1, they kind of designed it as a toy, which is fun. I know how Chris's brain works. He likes toys, fun things to play with. No, it's true. You know, and it's actually, that's the OP1 was kind of made serious waves at the time, and this company is still doing some loads of really cool stuff. And you know, I think there was a mode on it where it had a cow.
Yeah, cow
mode.
Cow mode. Yeah,
Great mode.
There was all this stuff on it, and I remember watching you using it, going, I have no clue how it was. And to be honest with you, at the time, I remember turning my nose up at it. It's not a proper synthesizer. You can't change the filter frequency, and you know, all this stuff. But actually, the point is, you play with it and cool sounds come out.
Yeah.
And it had a very unique sound.
Yeah.
So that was, at the time, I seem to remember it was still mostly acoustic instruments that we were using. I think that was just about the only synth that we were using.
For the track we're going to listen to. Yeah.
Well, yeah, this is probably an appropriate time to get into one of the tunes, because I think Mermaid was probably one of the first ones we did in the studio, and it kind of set what am I trying to say?
It set a precedence.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it set a precedence for how we, before we went into the studio, how we like to work together, in that we tend to generate material quite quickly. Mm-hmm. And this was a good example, because we were still just in a room. We got into a room together, and there was a couple of ideas kind of knocking around, and I think we wrote the tune, I don't know.
It came out quick.
Just the two of you. Piano and voice.
Yes.
Piano and voice.
Piano and voice, yeah.
Which ended up being the Wurlitzer in this tune. So if you hit play on the whirly, maybe solo the whirly part, Al, and the voice.
I've got a feeling, actually, the Wurlitzer from this may be from the initial Giant Wafer session.
Oh, really?
I've got a feeling that, looking at it.
Well, if you solo it.
So that would be...
So that's...
Yeah.
It was just that and the vocal. So if you solo the vocal with it, that's how we wrote it.
Exactly. And the minute that Chris, that you were playing that motif, I just had an image or a thought of a fish. And then I was thinking of this Elizabeth Bishop poem.
Yes. Yeah.
Fish.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was nice. It was just a poem that she wrote in the 40s about catching a fish and letting it go. But it's also about the kind of the dislocation of who she is and where she can find herself, and the question of loneliness and what it all means to her. So there was this connection with nature, but then also, you know, the kind of existential, what's the meaning of me, but also this fish that I've caught but that I want to let go.
Yeah.
So the kind of link with imagery and kind of a visual process, kind of that's what happens when we get together.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So that kind of that's what happened.
And in this case, this motif, this repeated, it really sparked all of that for you. Amazing.
Basically.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the poem, she at one point she declares it's all rainbow, rainbow, rainbow.
Yeah.
And it kind of comes to this moment of, you know, meaning, as in just trying to find and locate the meaning of what you're doing, you know.
Yeah.
So that's where we began. So a fish came out of the water to greet me. That's kind of how the lyrics or
and
the
layers also kind of feed that lyrical narrative. Like, if you scrub back a bit and you know, bring in even the brushes, I feel like had that kind of, we wanted to get that.
Yeah, a wave like.
Yeah, bring in the brushes. Maybe keep the whirly there, because that's like the staple.
A relationship
meat
to
and
energy,
potatoes, as they
flow,
say.
water,
Yeah.
I seem to
being
remember
out in the boat.
we were trying to make watery sounds.
Yeah.
I remember that. You know, there's a lot of delays on things.
The piano is quite water. If you bring the piano in.
Let me just have a look. Where's that in the project? Oh, here we go.
Haven't we got Robbo Bubbles as well or something? What's it called?
Robbo Fish.
Robbo Fish. Play the
This sound.
Robbo Fish.
Robbo is just like this.
There he is.
There
He
it
is
There's
the fish. As in, he's surrounding the boat and he's just jumping
And bring the
in and out.
OP1 as
love
well
that.
in.
Can we do a quick name check of the guys? Obviously, we're going to talk about them properly. So
Yeah.
who's all in Snowpoet?
Matt Robinson
On keys?
on keys.
Dave Hamlet on drums.
Yeah.
Josh Arcaleo.
Yeah.
He plays saxophone. He plays bass as well. And for the first 2 records, we had Nick Hosley-White, who's
Yeah.
a guitarist.
Cool.
Yeah, so like in terms of the layers, there's basically just watery sounds we went for, didn't we?
So, Chris, is it that thing that you get together? Lauren's like, I have a vision now. I'm hearing this. It could be water-based. There's the symbolism with the fish and oceanic feeling.
Yeah.
Then is there then a bilateral light that goes where you're like, oh my God, we're going to lean into the watery aspects from a production point of view? Like, how does that, is that a conscious thing that you guys discuss together from a sort of production concept point of view?
Do you know what? I don't think it's a discussion. We never like, it's never like, this is about this, so this
Right.
needs to be. I think I just get it. When
You
Lauren
get it.
starts
It
singing
happens.
and starts writing lyrics, there's just an understanding there.
Yeah.
Obviously, like some stuff goes in that eventually gets cut out and stuff.
Yeah.
But in terms of just general vibe,
You're just of one accord, and that's a big reason why this has worked so well.
yeah.
Because there's that kind of, yeah.
I think there's I don't know, I can say this and I feel like I am quite a serious person, but in the essence of play and of feeling like we can make spontaneous decisions together is something that I am interested in, as in I'm interested in intellectually, musically, as in that idea of being in that moment of spontaneous play. And I feel like for you as a producer and a composer and a recording artist, as in you love being in that space as well.
Yeah.
And you work so well with people in that space,
Yeah.
And-
Creating a world, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. As in, like, it's really exciting seeing you move into that space. You're like, oh my God, what's possible here?
I love
That's the
it.
thing, when the possibilities start opening up, that's when it's really exciting.
Yeah, and you draw on so much. Like, I was also thinking with this track, I was thinking of the Hijira album, Joni Mitchell album from the 70s, and Amelia, that track.
Yeah.
And thinking about her approach to lyric writing and song composition, and again the visual narrative behind the tune, the first woman to fly over the Atlantic, and the kind of being in the air and the space and kind of the solitude, the alone traveling, but again connecting you with being in a space and being somewhere where you're traveling. And people have often said that to me, that they like listening to Snowpoet music when they're moving, or like when they're in a car, or when they're on a train, or when they're doing something where there's like this motion. And I feel like that we are interested in that as people, as in
totally.
just in saying something about that. And when I think about inspirations, or I think about text or music that has inspired me, it evokes that kind of that sense of movement or travel or discovery when you're by yourself, or and what that means in nature, and the kind of the link between.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I when we're working on an album, and listening to bounces, production references, demos, mixes from Alex, I always have to be moving.
Really?
When I'm listening. Yeah. I don't know why, but it's funny you say that because I've never sort of realised that until you just said that just now. But yeah, there's definitely a feeling of going somewhere or moving.
Yeah. So maybe this is a moment to bring in Alex, because I'm wondering about, you had a sort of strong realizations about what to do differently with this record, and I'm hearing, like, we've already heard a little taste of the depth and the layers and what's happening sonically, right? So what are some of the conversations that happen from a producer to an engineer with Alex to sort of start to say, do you know what, I think we're going to do this a bit differently, and what did that look like between the two of you?
Well, I don't think there was actually ever an explicit conversation about this. I think it was, the explicit conversation that happened was with the first recording. We've got a band, do you want to come and record it? That's what happened. You turned up at the studio with the band, and I seem to remember us driving from Cardiff up to Giant Wafer in my little Peugeot 106 with I think 5 people in the car and the saxophone and suitcases, and it was like, great, we're going to go and I'll record these guys, we'll set up the microphones, then we'll pack down and go home. And that was kind of the whole premise of the recording, was that was what was going to happen. So that's what happened. Whereas with this music, because you and I had then sat in my flat in Bath, or my dad's flat in Bath, and played around with the music in Pro Tools and played around with Reaper as well. I remember we were using, which Reaper in some ways kind of encourages you to muck around a bit more than Pro Tools does. Even though I'm a Pro Tools guy, we'd already kind of sat down and basically just had fun doing it. And that's what we were doing. We're just having fun. So when we went back up to the studio, for whatever reason, it was just a case of, this is what we're going to do while we're here. Sure, we were still in Pro Tools. In fact, we were on an old version of Pro Tools at the time. I seemed a very old version of Pro Tools, where you couldn't really do much, and we were just kind of treating it as a strip of tape. But also I do remember that, we'd already been playing around with loads of post-production ideas beforehand, and I think it was more just that the process wasn't limited and restricted. Do you see what I'm saying?
In what way was it more free in this version of it, would you say?
Well, I'm trying to remember. The funny thing is, I'm scrolling through this project now and I'm looking at bits and bobs going, I think quite a lot of this stuff is things that we actually pulled in from the sessions, the kind of scrapped sessions. There's quite a lot of stuff in here that I'm going, I'm even looking at the labeling in the Pro Tools project going, that isn't actually, you wouldn't have done it like that if we'd recorded it and put it together in tools. So I think quite a lot of what's happening here is that we had the files possibly from the previous recording where we were using bits and bobs. So, straight away it was just more of a like, what have we got around us? What's on the computer? We've also got mics set up, ready to record drums. There's a beautiful little upright at the studio, which is basically, I think that's the only piano on
the Zender
upright.
In the kitchen, that one.
And
infamous.
It was very much a case of like, we kind of already know one or two of these tunes. We're just going to do them again, but we're going to be more relaxed in how. Let's look at what we've got around us and use it.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
I feel like there was such an innocence around it all.
Yeah, it was a simpler time as well.
It was such a simpler time in life. I don't know about you. I don't know how you three feel about that, but everything's gotten a lot more complicated.
There's less doom.
There was.
Yeah, it's that thing of, is it easier or harder to make fewer or more records? Do you know what I mean? It's like your first record is sort of, there's a lot of challenges around it, but does it also in some ways, is it easier than when you've made your 4th or your 5th album? There's that innocence, everything's new, isn't it? And Alex, I was just wondering what it was, sort of open-ended, big question maybe, but what was it like for you working with the band, with Chris and Lauren in this way? It was, I gather, it was a sort of new kind of album for you.
Yeah, it was just really good fun. It was, for me, it was more of an opportunity to explore, because before, let's say, I am a total kind of probably a bit on the spectrum nerd in that I will go to bed reading about mic preamps,
Love
right?
it.
That's, or if, you know, so,
Love it.
so for me, it's like, oh, cool. Like, this is an opportunity to really mess around with recording some drums, which the opportunity kind of wasn't there as much before, because it was like, just capture a drum kit. That's it. The drum, you know, and I recorded on that first thing we did, the drums were recorded like it was a jazz drum kit.
Yeah.
And that's when I really had to mess around with it in the mix afterwards to get them to hit a bit harder. Whereas this, we actually had someone who really deserves a mention here. I'm not sure if you remember this, but we had Andrew Lawson with us.
Yeah.
So Andrew Lawson from Fieldgate Studios in Cardiff, he came up, who's a great recording engineer and good friend of mine. We also had, did we have Sam Barnes with
Possibly,
us for this?
yeah.
He's a student who was on my course at the Royal Welsh College. He's a great musician in his own right. And they came up just to kind of, this shows you how loose it was. It was just to have fun and help out. There was no set agenda about what we're going to do. I mean, sure, we're going to go and make a load of music, but there was no like, right, you're the assistant engineer, you're this, you know, it was just like, we're going up to the studio, there's loads of great gear there. Andrew also bought some equipment with him, you know, we bought some really nice M49 microphones and all this stuff. So we had some really high-end stuff on hand with us. And it was just kind of, from my point of view, I was going, cool, I can like, you know, I can do some serious drum recording now. I can play around with this high-end stuff and see what we can do. And it shows in the results, you know, the drum sounds and things like that we got on this album sound so much more like a record to me than what the previous stuff we did.
Yeah.
Something that I'm thinking, if you guys are up for it, maybe each of you has the opportunity to sort of pick one element of this and can kind of focus a little bit on a walkthrough of something like that. Does that sound good? Like maybe we could solo like the drums and talk about that from your point of view, and then each of you, there might be one aspect you want to discuss, or it's up to you, however you want to do it.
Well, I tell you what, the drums...
Since you mentioned the drums, maybe have a little listen and tell us.
Yeah, okay. The drums are an interesting one on this, because this song is a combination of different things. I think most of the drums that you're hearing throughout actually are from Reason. So we're using Propellerhead's Reason quite a lot of the time. It's a piece of software that I really love. And I think, let me just play you a little snippet of those. Again, I'll be honest with you, I definitely didn't really know what I was doing when it came to programming drums at the time. But I just wanted to have fun playing around with them. So we've got, there's all sorts of programmed, what's going on here?
This is interesting because we get into the layers under the hood of this in terms of the acoustic versus the programmed versus... That's part of what makes the project so interesting, I think. So if for listeners to sort of see the combination of these elements, I think is really cool.
Yeah, totally.
But there were things that we learnt while we were doing this as well. You know, we were doing it all to a click track, but this was my first realization that you can't just record drums to a click track, acoustic drums to a click track, and then put programmed drums on top. That's not going to work. Yeah. A drummer, and, you know, Dave Hamblett, fantastic drummer, but he still wanders around over a click because that's what a drummer should do if they're going to sound good.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So you can't then just go, oh, cool, we'll stick some programmed drums over the top, which is what we wanted to do on this.
Yeah.
I remember at the end, there's these drums come in, which let me see if I can find them. Hang on. I think at the time, what was this, 2015. So In Rainbows by Radiohead had been out for a good 8 or 9 years. I think they'd maybe just released The King of Limbs.
Yeah.
A few years prior. And Radiohead, massive influence in terms of their creative decisions and the way they use drums. And I seem to remember that while we were in the studio, we were kind of almost talking about, you know...
the Radiohead
drum sound. Let me just see if I
make
can
it more Radioheady.
Make it more...
Radiohead plug-in.
Yeah,
get the Radiohead
plug-in. Yeah, exactly.
There's now a Snowpoet plug-in.
Yeah.
It should be.
Well, we've got... let's have a look.
£200.
Be more than that, mate.
Black Friday sale.
So we've got the drums.
And so how do the programmed elements come in? Where are they?
Well, they actually came about afterwards. So
in post.
Yeah, we've got the shaker here as well.
Sounds like a new nugget we can write.
Yeah.
But these drums...
I know, I was just literally just thinking about
material.
like
I seem to remember, I can see it here. We had to chop the living daylights out of these drums because we just kind of went in blindly going, oh, it's all right, it's been recorded to a click track, it's fine. You know, when we end up adding our additional parts in, because it's all on a click, it'll all be in time. No, completely wrong. So you and I sat down in Bath and nudged the drums in, because you can't nudge, it doesn't sound right. If you nudge around programmed drums, it doesn't sound right to the ear, right? Yeah. The ear wants to hear electronic drums sounding like electronic drums. Yeah. If you start trying to shift the timing of electronic drums to fit in with a real drum kit, it's not going to sound like electronic drums anymore. And I think this song was about the kind of more mysterious.
Yeah. And that's a conceptual thing, isn't it? That in a project like this, it's moving from a jazz mentality to sort of saying, I've got great musicians in the studio who play amazing, and we wouldn't need to do anything to them, but we've made a decision on an aesthetic level to like chop it up, imagine it a different way. And it's actually it's a conceptual leap, isn't it? And for you guys, was there anything particular that you wanted to highlight as well? It's so good to hear about the drum journey. And was there anything from your guys' point of view that you sort of think?
I think we've kind of covered in terms of like diving into the track, you know, layers and stuff like that. I think more, you know, zooming out, it's, you know, this was the beginning, you know, this album, this is the start of it, and knowing what's there, the doors that are open for us, it was like, cool, we've made this album, we're really proud of it. Yeah. And it by the time, you know, it mixed and mastered, we were like, cool, I love this. This is, you know, what are we going to do next? And I think that's what the process of making this first record kind of left us at the end was this is, I love this, you love this, you know, we've got a good thing here, we've got a really nice relationship, you know, egoless relationship and what's, you know, what are we going to do next? This is exciting.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with every subsequent making, there's always been that, like, we've always kind of done something and then we're like, what's the next thing? You know, if we've just finished something and then we've just made, like, you know, as in putting the, like, okay, the tracks are there, everything is there, we've gotten all the information to the record label, etc. It's like, what's next? What are you going to do next? You know, there is always that drive of continuing. Yeah. And even though you do know the whole, it's such a big mountain, like, we also have those conversations where we're like, oh God, start again. Here we go again. You know, it's quite a momentous thing.
Yeah, it's a massive thing. Guys, I think we're probably nearly there, but before we wrap up, there's just two things I want to ask you. I think we all work with young musicians and students, and I think this will be incredibly inspiring for them to. I get the question a lot, and I'm sure you do, how do you record? What do I do? And I just think for them to learn that actually it's okay to make something that doesn't quite do it and to go back and to make mistakes and learn. And I think that would be really valuable for them. I just wanted to, I suppose, just sort of acknowledge that and see if you had any thoughts that you might want to, for your listening youngsters, any pearls of wisdom on that, you know.
Yeah, but as you say, as in just perfectly as you said it, that it is just a beginning of something, and you know, ever tried, ever failed. You know, try again, fail better. You know, as in that kind of mentality of it's a process, and we were talking about that earlier with Alex. As in you're getting more experience in the process, and it's not the outcome. It's never about the outcome. It's just kind of what you learn in the making. Yeah. And that's invaluable, you know?
Great. That seems like a lovely note to end on for this first episode. So thank you, Chris, Lauren.
Thanks so much, Oli.
Alex.
Thank you, Oli.
Yeah.
We've got a long way to go. There's a lot of great stuff in store on these future episodes. So thanks, listeners, and we'll see you for episode 2 very soon.
Together we walked up into a cloud of dreams. It's just you and I.